So congratulations, you've decided on your business English course. And of course, you want to be successful. And not only in this course, but you want to be able to tackle the demands of other courses and further business English courses. And what we need to get started is a number of basic concepts and vocabulary about business and about companies. So to get us started, we're going to look at business structure. So let's have a look at this word cloud. This is a quick brainstorm I did of different business sectors. And as you can see, the world of business is enormous and there are many, many, many different sectors. Now, the good news is that no business English course can cover every sector of business and all the vocabulary you need to talk about each single sector. Learning the vocabulary and the concepts for different sectors of business is really about lifelong learning, and it will be affected by the job that you're doing now or the career that you follow in the future. So for example, when you leave university or college, you might get a job in the chemical industry and you learn everything there is to know about the chemical industry, and you learn about the products, the concepts and the vocabulary. And after a few years, you move on from the chemical industry into the pharmaceutical industry. And again, you begin to learn all the vocabulary and all the concepts you need to be able to talk about the pharmaceutical industry. It could be then, throughout your career, you never work in the automotive industry and you never learn anything about the production of cars. So how do we learn about different sectors for a business English course? Well, the first thing is you should be able to talk about sectors in general terms and you should be able to know the different names. So mining, chemical, pharmaceutical, automotive, agriculture, for example. You should also be able to know how to pronounce these words. So it's chemical, it's a hard k sound at the beginning, chemical, and it's pharmaceutical industry. The next thing then is to really sort of get yourself interested in 1, 2, or maybe even 3 areas of industry. Now it could be you're already working as a student and you're working in a particular area. It could be that you're working, for example, if you're in an international city, that you're working in a hotel and you're speaking lots of English in your job and you already know quite a lot of English about hotels and about customer service. Now this will be great for your English course, and this is an area that you can concentrate on and use to talk about when you get exam questions. Maybe indeed it's your intention after you leave university or college that you want to establish a startup in the hospitality industry and you want to learn as much as you can about that industry. As I say, concentrate on 1, 2 or 3 sectors and find out in general about those sectors. So for example, I've taken the hospitality industry here. And just to have a look at the hospitality industry, I've come up with a general description. So the hospitality industry covers aspects such as accommodation, food, travel and tourism. It provides services to customers and is thus, therefore, customer oriented with customer satisfaction as a main objective. You can do this, as I say, for another couple of areas. So it's very, very unlikely that an exam question will ask you about a specific business sector, and that for a basic business English course that you need to know about every sector. For example, I think it's unlikely that you would get a question like this. Write a paragraph outlining a business or production process in the pharmaceutical industry. I think it's much more likely that the question will be worded like this. Write a paragraph outlining a business or a production process. So what you need to do is to learn to be able to use questions and to take the questions and show in exams and assessments what you know and what you've learned. So you could take this question, if you've learned about the hospitality industry, to talk about the hospitality industry and to talk about a process in that sector. You could then have the opportunity to show what you know and to use the vocabulary that you've learned for the course. So how do you get to know about different sectors? Well, the first thing is, if you're doing a business English course, you must be interested in business. And what you need to do is to read the English business press as much as you possibly can and set yourself targets in your reading. So I'm going to take one article a week from The Economist, the Financial Times, the New York Times or something like that and read about business. And what you will do is pick up vocabulary and pick up concepts and pick up ideas. Now what I've done here at random is to take the contents page of The Economist magazine. Now this is taken at random, but as we can see, there are articles about the healthcare sector, the hospitality sector, and the car industry sector. Another thing you can do is to look around at companies, especially if you're already working in a company. Go to the company website and have a look at what the company says about itself. How does it describe itself and what kind of vocabulary again is being used and what kind of vocabulary can you pick up from the website. So moving on from talking about business sectors, then we need to talk about different kinds of organization. And the first thing we need to look at is organizations in terms of the size of the company. So we're looking at moving from a startup company to a global company. And we've got concepts like startup, small business, SME, small to medium size industry, medium sized, national, international, multinational, and global. So what you need to do is get yourself familiar with these terms and think about what this kind of company entails and what the company looks like and maybe what the advantages and the disadvantages are of these different companies. You also need to think about where the size of company comes in the growth of a company. So if we take startup, I would like to direct you to an online site, which is Investopedia, and they have a really good definition of a startup. So let's have a quick look at this. So if we look at the table of contents here on the left-hand side, they talk about what a startup is, how understanding startups, thinking about startups, the advantages and the disadvantages, and they give you some examples. And again, by reading articles like this, you will be picking up vocabulary, and picking up concepts. And for example here, if we look at this first paragraph, we can see the expression venture capitalist. And if I click on this, this will take me to the definition of a venture capitalist. So a venture capitalist is a private equity investor that provides capital to companies with high growth potential in exchange for an equity stake. Now, Investopedia also has a really good explanation of SMEs as well, which you might want to look at. So if we go back to the vocabulary, there are three kinds of companies that I think people sometimes have difficulties with, and they have problems really understanding the difference between the different kinds of companies. And that's international, multinational, and global. So I'd like to take a quick look at these. So let's start with a national company. Let's take an example. So I start one year with a startup in a home office. And as the months go on, my business grows, and then I begin to do business in my town and I establish an office in my town. The business grows, and then I begin to sell not only in my own town, but I begin to sell in the area of my country. And as the business grows, then I begin to sell all over the country. And this would be a national company. So when does a national company become an international company? So let's have a look at a definition. So an international company is a company that exports and sells goods to other countries. But the company doesn't make any investment in those countries. It doesn't have any subsidiaries or affiliates or any other or production plants in those countries. The headquarters and all the business functions are centered in the home country. I've highlighted the word here, headquarters. Please notice that the word has an S on the end. It's headquarters. And there are no branches of the company in any of the countries that the company does business with. This is an international company. So when does an international company become a multinational company? Well, there's a small difference. And a multinational company is when a company begins to have establishments in other countries. They have branches, they have operations, they have sales operations, they have production plants. There'll still be a central headquarters, but branches tend to be in charge of the local markets. And then we move on to a global company. Now, a global company becomes different again because a global company has investment and business in countries, in all the countries, and these tend to be on a worldwide basis where the company operates. The company probably has worldwide subsidiaries and locations, and it tends to have the same products. Think here of a brand or a product or a company like Coca-Cola, and these products tend to be offered in every country, and there's very little as regards local culture and local tastes and preferences. And this is a global company. Now, these definitions are slightly problematic. It's very difficult to know sometimes where a company is in its growth stage. And companies can really make confusing definitions about themselves. So if you look around online, you might find an international company that actually describes itself as multinational, or you might find a multinational company, it feels multinational, but they actually describe themselves as a global company. Now, growth at one time could be considered as very linear. And we had the situation that I outlined before, where a company moves from a startup into a national company, into an international company, into a multinational, and into a global company. Now, technology has blurred the lines quite a lot. And again, if I could give you a quick example. So if we take the example again of starting a startup in a home office, I could do this maybe on a Saturday afternoon and establish a website, but I could already find myself operating internationally on the Monday morning. I could be getting inquiries from other countries, and I could find, according to the product or the service that I'm offering, that I'm able to offer to other countries. So this is size of organization. The next thing that we need to look at is the ownership of businesses and look at the different terms connected with that. But before we do that, we need to look at some vocabulary. So the words that I have on this list are self-employed, liability, which can be unlimited or limited, liabilities, and to be liable for, assets, debts, shares, shareholders and dividends, IPOs, which is an initial public offering or a flotation, and a parent company and subsidiary. So let's just go through this list and make sure that you understand these expressions. So a self-employed person is a person who's working for him or herself rather than an employer. Liability are the things that you're responsible for, the things that you're legally responsible for as a company. And if you think about running a company, these could cover different things, such as suppliers' invoices or wages of people who've worked for you and you haven't paid for them yet. And companies can have unlimited liability, so they're liable for everything. It's not a limited liability, and they can have limited liability. And when we talk about liabilities, then we have to talk about assets and debts. So assets are the owned resources that a business has. It can be property or it can be anything really that has value that's available to meet the debts of the company. And the debts of the company are the money that the company owes, or it's the obligation to pay money. So for example, personally, you can have debts such as a credit card, a car loan, or even a mortgage on your apartment or on your house. So some kind of companies issue shares, and shares are part of the company's capital. And the holder of a share is called a shareholder, and the holder has a part of the profit of the company, and the profit is normally paid in the form of a dividend. Some shares are traded on the stock exchange. And when shares are first put on the market, then this is called an initial public offering, or very often an IPO or a flotation. And finally, parent company and subsidiary. The parent company, parent, not mother company, parent company is the company that owns and controls other companies. It's often associated with the word headquarters. And the subsidiary company are the companies that are controlled by the parent company. So for example, you can have your parent company in Sweden and you've got subsidiaries in Japan, Australia and France. So what kind of types of ownership are we looking at? So for the purposes of a business English course, we're going to look at these types of business ownership: a sole trader, a partnership, a cooperative, a private limited company, a public limited company, and franchising. And I'm just going to go through each definition of these types of ownership. So let's have a look at a sole trader. So a sole trader or proprietorship is a self-employed person who has his or her own business. Now, what's important here is the person is liable for the debts of the company. So personal debts and company debts are more or less intermingled, and the person is responsible for both lots of debts. And the person has, and this is not limited, it's unlimited liability. Now, a company then can also be a partnership. And a partnership is basically, it's a group of two or more professionals, and they have ownership of the company together. So in your reading about business, think about lawyers that get together and form a partnership, or partnerships are very typical in the advertising industries. Big famous companies like BBDO, for example, started off as partnership companies. Now, a cooperative is different again, and a cooperative is an organization that's owned and run by the people involved. So this is normally the people who are employed in the company. And a very famous cooperative in the United Kingdom is John Lewis. Now, John Lewis, if you don't know it, it's a chain of department stores, and they also have an online business as well. And at the moment, I think they employ around about 64,000 people. And every employee is a part of the cooperative of John Lewis. That means they own a part of the company. And as they own a part of the company, they get a part of the profits of that company. And they get, usually around about Christmas time, they get a bonus associated with the profits of that company. Now, a company can then become a limited company. And limited companies are all to do with limited liability. And first of all, we've got a private limited company. And a private limited company then is a company that issues shares in the company, but the shares are issued to a closed group of people and shareholders. And these people are normally the directors of the company, and they have ownership of the company, and they have limited liability. So personal ownership and the ownership of the company become two separate things. And a private limited company, the phrase to learn here is a separate legal entity. And the other kind of limited company that you can have then is a public limited company. Now, the difference here is with the shares. The shares are not offered here to a closed group of people, but they're offered to you and me. They're offered to the public, and they're offered to the public on the stock exchange. And the company has certain responsibilities, such as producing reports on the financial health of the company. And a good example here of a public limited company in the United Kingdom is British Telecom. And finally, we should look at franchising. And I've taken a very famous franchise here, which is McDonald's. And if we just go through the definition, and then we'll break it down a little bit. So a franchise is an agreement or a license between two legally independent parties, which gives a person or group of people, the franchisee, the right to acquire a proven business model and market a product or service using the branding, trademark, or trade name of the franchisor. So if we take McDonald's, McDonald's is the franchisor. And they've built a very well-known global brand. The colours of the company are very familiar to us. This yellow and red. The golden arches of McDonald's are a very well-known brand symbol for the company. When you walk in a McDonald's restaurant, you tend to recognise the colours, you tend to recognise the way that the restaurant is laid out, the way the food is served to you in the way that you order food, and indeed the food, the product itself. So what a franchisee does, the franchisee has a restaurant, but rather than trying to establish their own branding from the start, what they do is they take this proven business model from a company like McDonald's and they pay a sum of money in order to be able to use the McDonald's branding and products. And they run the restaurant and they are the franchisee. Now there are other words in the English language that work like this. For example, we have employer, the person who employs, and we have employee, the person who takes the employment. We have a trainer, the person who gives the training, and the trainee, the person who receives the training. So talking about business structure. First of all, we've looked at business sectors, and we've talked about concentrating on 1, 2, or 3 sectors of business. Learn the vocabulary, the concepts, the ideas connected with that industry. Be sure that you could talk and use an exam question to talk about one of the sectors that you're really interested in. An exception here might be if you're doing what's called an ESP course. This is English for specific purposes. In the university I worked in, we had a specific purposes course in marketing communications, and learning about the marketing communications industry and about the structure of that industry and how it worked was a part of the business English course. And this brought up specific vocabulary, such as holding companies, full service agency. But if you're doing a general business English course, just concentrate on the sectors that you have interest in. You'll find this more productive. And then, as I say, when you get into work, you'll begin to learn about the area that you're working in. Then you need to be able to talk about size of industry and to talk about the different sizes of companies and to think about the growth of a company. This will come into later courses that you might be doing, for example, case studies in business English or in other courses. And then you need to be able to talk about and to write about the ownership and to use the definitions for the different kinds of ownership of companies. So thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe, please like. This really helps me to keep these courses going. Please hit the notification button, and I'll see you in the next video, which will be about company organisation. Thank you very much indeed for listening.